What's up guys, my name is Mike. I'm the Weird Pigeon of Weird Pigeon Productions, and you clicked on this video, so you already know what it's about. Today we're going to be doing a review of the Sigma 18 to 35mm f1.8 lens. This is an absolute beast of a lens, and really, this isn't actually the lens. This is the lens with an adapter on it. This is the lens, not as large, but still a beast of a lens. And I'm going to be giving you some of the pros, some of the cons of this lens, why I love it, and why I'm actually getting rid of it, and who this lens is for. So a lot to cover in this video. I'll keep it quick, and let's get straight into it. First thing I want to talk about with this lens is why I got it. I got this lens years ago, back, it was midway through my freshman year of college, and I didn't have any kind of expensive lens in my arsenal. The only lenses I had were kit lenses. At the time I was shooting on a Canon Rebel T7i, and this lens was great for it. I absolutely love this lens. I used this lens exclusively for probably around 3 years. And that's because when I got this lens and I put it on my Canon Rebel camera, all of the other lenses that I had used leading up to this lens just didn't even compare. The quality of this lens is incredible. It was like having an all-new camera. That's how wonderful the quality of this lens is. However, after years of exclusively using this lens, I have actually switched camera brands from Canon to Sony. I currently shoot on a Sony a7 III, which is an incredible camera. I'll probably do a review of that beast that I'm shooting on right now in a later video. But because this is a Canon lens, really, this is a Sigma lens for Canon, and I'm shooting on a Sony, even with the adapter, there are a few issues. And ever since I got some Sony lenses, I haven't really had much of a use of the Sigma lens. And I'll get more into those issues later on in this video. First thing I want to talk about, however, is some of the great things about this lens, what this lens does right, and really why you should think about buying this thing. First thing that comes to mind is the price. The price is, when I first got it, it was $800, but since then it has depreciated to around $650. And for 650 bucks, this is an incredible lens. It's kind of so shocking to me that you can actually buy this lens with the quality that it has for $650 US. Second thing I want to talk about, which I've already touched on a little bit, is just the image quality that this lens has. Again, when I first put this lens on my Canon camera, it was like buying a brand new camera. That's how incredible the quality of this lens is. And just the color that comes out of this thing, even now that I shoot on Sony and I have Sony lenses, the few times that I have used this lens since, just the image quality is incredible. It's almost like a breath of fresh air putting this lens on my camera. It just looks so good. The color, the contrast, the sharpness, this lens is a total beast when it comes to creating awesome B-roll footage, A-roll footage, and taking incredible pictures. Next thing I want to talk about with this lens is the f-stop. This is an f1.8, which basically means you can open up the aperture really, really wide, and it takes in a whole lot of light. That does get you a very shallow depth of field, but it also makes this lens an absolute beast in low light scenarios. I cannot tell you how many times I have used this lens just specifically because of the fact that it is so great in low light, even after I've bought some of my Sony lenses. Another great thing about this lens's aperture is the fact that it is a continuous aperture no matter what millimeter the lens is set to. So some lenses, if you don't already know, will actually change their aperture when you zoom in. This lens does not have that issue. No matter how you zoom, the aperture will remain the same, which is great if you're shooting video. Another great thing about this lens is the build quality. This lens was built to last. It's made of metal and glass. There's not a lot of plastic on this lens. And what plastic there is, it's a very hard, strong plastic. The rubber is a little worn after so many years of use, and it's mainly just dirty. You can actually clean this off. I just haven't. But again, the build quality is incredible. I've never had a problem with this lens breaking or not working. This lens has been in the rain, it's been in the snow. I haven't taken it into the desert or the sand or anything like that, but I have taken it to the beach, so I guess that counts. And it continues to just perform phenomenally after years and years of use. I cannot speak highly enough of this lens's build quality. The last thing I want to talk about with this lens that makes it really so awesome is the fact that this lens is actually customizable. You can tweak some of the settings within this lens on your computer because it comes with this really neat base. This is just a cheap plastic electronic base, but this base connects to the lens like this, just snaps and locks into place. And it comes with a USB port that you can then plug into your computer, and this little bottom light will light up, and you can customize this lens. You can customize some of the settings with the free software that you can download from the Sigma website. Just a really neat feature that they didn't have to add, but they did anyways, that to me just increases the value of this, you know, monster of a lens. Now, I've mentioned a lot of great things about this lens, but I do have a few issues with it. The first issue being the fact that it does not have image stabilization. You've got your switch for autofocus and manual focus, but no switch for image stabilization, which I didn't think would be too much of a problem when I first got it. But after using it for a couple photo shoots, I could really tell that I missed that image stabilization. A lot of my shots were a little bit blurrier and fuzzier because of the fact that I really just couldn't shoot at such a low shutter speed. Especially with video, there was a lot more camera shake in my shots that I just wasn't used to. I didn't realize how important that image stabilization was to me until I lost it. And of course, after shooting with this thing exclusively for like 2 to 3 years, I didn't really miss it after a while, but at first it was a bit of a difficult switch. Another just weird thing about this lens is the fact that the zoom ring here works opposite of the Canon lenses. I don't know why. I think it works the same way as the Sony lenses, but all the Canon lenses that I'd used up to this lens went the opposite direction. So I cannot tell you how many times I was trying to zoom in and I was actually zooming out. And yeah, it was a bit of a headache dealing with. But again, after shooting with this lens for so long, it's something that I kind of just forgot about. The next issue I have with this lens is probably the biggest problem I have with this thing. And again, I talked about how great this lens is for videographers, but there is one massive downside if you're shooting video, and that's the fact that the motor inside the lens is very loud. If you're using this lens and you're running autofocus and you have a microphone mounted to your camera, I can almost guarantee that the microphone will pick up the sound of the motor in this lens running. And that's even if it's on a Canon camera. It was a problem on my Rebel camera. It was a problem on my Sony camera. It's a major issue with this lens. Now, there's a way to work around that. If you're just shooting B-roll and you're not using that audio, that's fine. You don't have to worry about ruining the audio because the motor is running. And if you ever have this camera on a tripod, you're shooting a still subject, or you're just shooting a manual focus, you're not gonna have this issue. As long as your subject doesn't move around a lot, it works in autofocus because it doesn't have to hunt for that focus as often. Or again, if you're just shooting in manual focus, it bypasses the problem entirely. But the motor that keeps up with the autofocus in this lens is pretty loud and does cause some issues with your audio in a video. For my photographers out there, that's not really a problem, but if you are shooting a video, that is something to consider. Another issue with this lens that you might not even think about is the fact that this lens is massive. It's big, it's heavy, and that's really a product of the build quality. I feel like a lot of the metal they use does increase the weight of this lens, but after a while of holding this and a camera, especially if you have this on a gimbal and you're trying to stabilize it, it can make your camera very front heavy, which can cause issues with stabilization on like a gimbal. This can be kind of annoying to tote around all day, even if you don't have stuff like the adapter and the lens hood on it. It's still a massive lens. This lens is big and it probably weighs twice as much as all the other lenses that I have. Now, the final issue that I have with this lens, and the reason that I'm selling it, is because it's only good if it's on Canon cameras that use an APS-C crop sensor. If you put this on a full frame camera, you start to run into problems, especially if it's not a native camera body, like a Sony mirrorless camera, like the Sony a7 III. What I've noticed with this lens when shooting in full frame on my Sony a7 III with the adapter, which again, that's the only way you can use it, is that when I am zoomed out at 18mm, I get a strong vignette to the point that I can literally see not only the lens hood, but I can also see some of the internals of the actual lens, therefore making my footage and photos basically unusable. It's really annoying. And the only way I can shoot with this lens in full frame for both photos and video is at the 35mm mark. And even with that, I get a little bit of a vignette on my image with and without the lens hood. So that to me was the biggest reason in why I'm selling this thing. Now again, it's not unusable at 35mm, you can definitely use it, and I actually did for almost about a year. When I bought my Sony a7 III, I didn't have the money for any Sony lenses, so I just bought a used MC-11 adapter, and I attached it to the lens, and it worked great at 35mm, or if I shot in cropped sensor mode. And for about a year, I was only shooting at 35mm in full frame. and I was able to get by till I had enough money to eventually buy some more lenses for my Sony camera. And I really hate saying that I'm gonna be selling this guy, but ever since I got my 24-105, I've maybe only pulled this lens out for a couple of photo shoots because, again, this thing's such a low light beast and I was shooting at night. But besides that, I haven't found much of a reason to use this lens because the only time I can really use it at my camera's full potential is at 35 millimeters. And 24-105 covers that. Now, with all that said, you can still use this lens on cameras with a sensor that's smaller than APS-C. If you have like a micro four thirds sensor, you can use this lens with something like a speed booster adapter. I know Metabones makes an incredibly expensive but incredibly powerful speed booster adapter for micro four thirds cameras that fit to this lens. So if that is an option for you, that's something I would go with. I have friends who have done that and it works incredibly well, no issues there. Although this lens only works at 35 with vignette, the adapter was incredible. This little MC-11 adapter is just so powerful and was able to not only let me use this lens on my Sony camera, but it was able to convert the EF mount to E mount and continue using the incredible autofocus that this lens produces. And honestly, it's almost as fast as a regular Sony lens. And I actually did have a chance to use this Sigma adapter with a regular Canon EF mount lens, and it didn't work nearly as well as the Sigma lens. This is really meant for Sigma lenses, not for Canon lenses. But I was able to use the Canon lens on my Sony camera. I just didn't have very good autofocus, but in manual focus, it worked really well. So there's that. So with all that said, I feel like this lens is best for people who have Canon cameras, who have crop sensors, and are looking for a really high quality lens for a very great price. I mean, this is really a steal of a deal. You cannot pass up this lens if you're looking for a wide angle lens. I highly recommend it for video and photography, but I will not be using this lens anymore. The reason I'm retiring this lens and selling it is because I recently purchased the Sony Zeiss 16-35 millimeter. So not only do I have all the zoom range of this lens, I have a little bit more and I can actually use this lens in full frame. And it's a Sony lens, so it works perfectly. And if you'd like to see a review of this lens and the lens I have on my camera right now, the 24-105, I'll make a video for both of these respectively, reviewing them, some of my pros, some of my cons. One thing I will be missing with this lens is just the fact that it's so great in low light. You get that very low f-stop, so I'll probably get another lens that's great for low light because this is an f4 and the lens I'm using right now is an f4. But really, that is my review of the Sigma 18-35 millimeter f1.8 lens. Again, great lens, as long as you have the specific camera that it works well with. So guys, that is it for this video. If you want to see other videos talking about camera gear, videography, photography, I even do videos on Star Wars, so if you're into any of that stuff, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. It would mean a whole lot. Also, leave a like on this video. I spend a lot of time working on these, and a like really helps out the channel and the video. So guys, that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Hello? Thank you for choosing Mass Thing. We'd like to reward you for making... Stop interrupting my videos.